Getting a balanced mix is easy, right?
What?
Okay, it's not, but in this video I'm going to show you 5 steps that make it way easier for producers of any level, steps that I wish I had been taught 25 years ago because it would have saved a lot of frustration and probably tears. So most people, when they start mixing, reach for the plugins like EQ, compression, reverb and all the bells and whistles before they set a solid foundation. But think of building a house. If you start with the furniture and fancy kitchen before you've built a solid foundation, the whole thing's just going to fall down. And it's the same with balancing your mix. We need that solid foundation. So how do you do it? Well, first you've got to know what the end result will look like, which means you need a plan to work towards. Now in mixing, that takes the form of a reference track. This is a professionally finished track in the same genre that you're producing that you can use to check your mix against and make sure that you're balancing it correctly. If you don't know what balance sounds like, how are you going to know when you get there? So the first thing I recommend is finding a reference track in the same genre you're producing. Similar instruments, similar energy, similar vibe, and that will really help you compare as you go. Now, of course, a reference track has already been mastered to a professional level, so it's going to sound really loud because it's gone through that final limiter. So if we try and balance our track to the mastered track, we're going to instantly run into clipping issues. So to get around that, we can just reduce the volume of the mastered track by 12 decibels, and that's important for a couple of reasons I'll mention in a minute. But once that's done, we're in a good position to start balancing our mix. So to show you the example, I'm using a reference track by John Summit and Haler for the track that I'm working on, but I guarantee this is going to work for you whether you're producing hip hop or pop or rock. So I've brought it into an audio channel in Ableton and I've reduced the volume by 12 decibels. Now I've done it here, not the channel fader, because I need those levels to be attenuated and show as much on this span, which is just a spectrum analyzer like this. If I reduce the volume after the fact on the channel fader, like so, we can see the levels here are much louder, and that's no good for us because our track hasn't been mastered yet. So when we open up a second instance of a spectrum analyzer on the master channel, we want ours to be comparably loud like that. Now you may have noticed that I'm actually doing this in mono, so I've summed everything from stereo to mono, and that's so my ears can just focus on the frequencies and the balances rather than getting caught up in the stereo field, which in my opinion doesn't matter yet. So the first thing I recommend doing after we've attenuated the reference track is to set your kick to be peaking at minus 12 decibels. Then we can just leave it there. When we've got a final balanced mix, we should have plenty of headroom on the master channel and avoid any clipping whatsoever. Now I used to set my kick to be peaking at 0 dB. Sometimes I'd even limit it so it sounded really loud soloed, but that would just end up killing my mix before I even got out the gate. So once we've set our kick, we need to mix in our next most important element, which in most music is going to be the bass line. Now the trouble is, not all bass lines are created equal. You might have a live bass guitar in your track, or you might have a subby 808 bass, or a really aggressive dubstep or trance bass. So how do we balance this with our kick drum over and above my least favorite get out clause for teachers, which is trust your ears? That's a personal peeve that. If our ears could be trusted, we wouldn't be trying to learn anything new, right? So I've realized that the balance of the sub bass is actually pretty similar across genres. So here's how we can balance our sub bass to our reference track sub bass. As you remember, we have got a spectrum analyzer on both the reference track and on our master channel. I've also now added in this EQ rolling off everything above 100 Hz, both on our channel and on the reference track. So at the moment, it sounds like this. That's just our kick drum playing, peaking at minus 12, and this is the reference track with the high end taken out. So we can hear there's a bass line in there as well. So now all we want to do is make sure that our low end sounds similar with all the high frequencies rolled off. So I'm going to start bringing up my sub bass, which is this channel, and it usually averages around 18, minus 18, and that's usually about the sweet spot. And I'm just going to check the low end energies similar between them. Sounding pretty good to me. And now I can take off the filter for each of them like so. So here's our reference track. And now I just need to mix in our mid bass so it sounds good with our sub bass, which we've already set. And our top bass. Now you might only have a sub bass in your track, But using this technique, you're going to make it balanced as well as any other genre, even if there are more high frequencies in your bass line. But at this point, your kick and bass should be working pretty well together. And in fact, there's no point moving further in your mix until you've got that essential foundation laid. Remember the house analogy? The next step is bringing up our snare drum. Again, this is going to differ per mix, so compare it with your reference track, but generally speaking, if you bring it up until it starts making your head bob and snap, and no higher than that, that's a pretty good level. Next, do the exact same thing with our hi-hats and our other percussion, not needing to move forwards in our mix until the kick, the bass, and the main snare are working together. This takes out loads of the frustration of deciding what to mix next. So let's do that now. I'm going to use my reference track, but what I'm going to do is find a different part of the reference track where there's not so much going on and it's maybe just the drums. Usually that would be the intro for the easiest place. Now I'm going to copy and paste that over to where we are doing our mix. And I'm just listening out for the hats at this point. So I can even turn off my bass for this. With our bass. Then when we've got that solid foundation, it's all about bringing in our main lead synth or vocal, depending on the genre you're producing, to work well with everything that's already there. And I recommend EQing out the low end of pretty much everything apart from the kick and the bass as high as you can get away with without it sounding tinny. Now there are some exceptions to this. If you've got male vocals, you probably won't want to cut anything below 70 or 80 hertz. And if you've got tom drums in your percussion as well, they'll need some low end too. But by taking out the low end from everything apart from the kick and the bass, you're really going to be opening up lots of space for your low end to kick hard. So let's try that out. We've got our bass and our drums working quite well. There's our reference track. So let's bring in the main synth riff. Just so it works well with everything else. And let's check it. Sounds quite good against the reference track. And now our main vocals. Sounds pretty good to me. The next step is to add a little bit of room reverb to the separate drums as you see fit, and that's really going to bring your mix to life. So to do that, I've muted most of the channels apart from our drums. I want to focus on those. And in my drum rack, I've created an auxiliary reverb chain here, room reverb, that's fed out to my main global room reverb. And you do that by opening up that button there, right-clicking, create return chain, and then selecting your room reverb from that drop-down menu. And then when I hit that S button, we can see we've got the ability, these send controls, to send a little bit of each drum out to the room reverb. So let's just add a little bit in order of importance of drum. So we're going to leave the kick drum dry. A little bit of clap. A little bit on the open hat. A little bit on that clave, and a little bit on the loop maybe. Don't think it needs it. And now I'm going to switch to stereo, see how it sounds. So this is with the room reverb off, just a little bit dry, and that's on. Lovely. Now at this point, you should pretty much have your core foundation yet, and all we have to do then is bring up everything else in the mix in order of importance, kind of as we have been doing so far anyway. And then we just need to make sure that they're not fighting or detracting from our core elements. Now, this is the danger zone. You can still absolutely ruin your mix, but by now it should be pretty well balanced. And after teaching literally thousands of students, many of whom are now releasing on their favorite labels and touring the world as DJs and producers, I guarantee there are 8 mixing mistakes you're almost certainly making that will render everything from this video completely useless. In fact, making even one of them can throw your whole mix off, so I break them down in this video here and show you exactly how to avoid them, and once you know them, you'll probably kick yourself, as it's kind of obvious in retrospect. So to give your music the best chance of success, after liking this video and subscribing to the channel, I'll see you over there.